I thought I'd keep the introduction short because I'm sure you're all dying to listen to Judy, but I thought I'd start by just sharing with you 3 very important but little-known facts about this morning's speaker. She doesn't know what I'm going to say either. Professor Judy McKimm bred the first UK Imperial Grand Champion La Perm cat, whose name was, for reasons best known to her, Aswami Miranda Keys. Presumably no relation to Miranda Keys.
No. Have you been Googling me? You've been Googling me, haven't you?
2, she is also a qualified dog behaviourist.
She is.
That's Judy, not Aswami Miranda Keys.
She's dead now.
Is she?
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been a good skill to have in a cat, I would have thought.
Would.
And the third and probably most important fact for those here today is that Judy originally trained as a nurse, but for some inexplicable reason gave it all up to become a professor of medical education, and I can't imagine why. But it's our loss, certainly. She's currently Professor of Medical Education with the College of Medicine at Swansea University, and it seemed easier to actually say what she hasn't done than what she has done. She's never been an astronaut, she tells me, and she's never been a social anthropologist, but apart from that, she's done more or less everything. She's previously worked at Imperial College London, University of Auckland, Unitech Institute in New Zealand, and as a senior advisor with the HEA, the Health Education Academy. I'm now actually going to break my own rule and lapse into acronyms because otherwise we wouldn't have time. She's been involved in projects all over the world for DFID, AusAid, the World Bank, WHO, GMC, QAA, HEA, AME, and ASME, amongst others. So if someone's got the water pistol. She has a particular interest and expertise in leadership, which I believe is going to be one of the main kind of thrusts of her presentation this morning. And I, for one, am very much looking forward to it, and I guarantee that you will too. Can I pass you over to Judy?
Okay, well, I did want to be a social anthropologist, but nobody told me about it at school, so I ended up being a nurse. Well, I enjoyed it, but... So, thanks, Gary. Thank you to the conference organisers for inviting me. It's really nice to be here. I've presented here in the past, but I've not spoken here, so it's really nice to be with you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So, I was asked to do this by Gary, really, and I've focused it on leadership, as Gary suggested. What I was asked to do was talk to you about some of the challenges and opportunities of educating tomorrow's healthcare leaders. And so I've wrapped it around a model. I do like models. I've wrapped it around a model. Those of you who know about leadership can doze off if you want to, but hopefully there'll be something you can take away from this. And yeah, hope it's a bit stimulating. So we're going to look at a few key concepts in leadership, management and followership. That's part of the issue. I'll introduce you to the Leadership in Threes model that I've been developing over the last couple of years. Look at some things which you might be able to take into your own training and education with your learners. And there might be some things that you might take away for your own practice as well. So we know that leadership and management are really important for all organisational success. And there's been, I've just realised I have put some acronyms. You didn't give me the instruction. So the World Health Organisation, the King's Fund, and the United States Patient Safety Institute have all written and said, really, we know that leadership and management are important. Can we stop questioning that it is important, and now let's look at how we best develop leadership skills, attributes and qualities, and enable people to work better together to improve health outcomes, patient experience, and for us in education, the student learning experience as well. And as healthcare changes, we've shifted a lot. I've picked a medical education one out for you with the anatomy, with the patient as the object. In the bottom of the lecture theatre, they're all men with mostly beards. I think there's an odd woman there, you know, like sweeping up or something. Things have changed, haven't they? We've seen big changes in the gendering of professions. We've seen changes in the role of the patient and expectations from patients and service users. And we've seen in many countries a shift from hospital-based inpatient care to primary care. And of course, we've seen the role of technology. So as leaders or managers, I'll come on to that in a minute, we need to be able to be very adaptive and work in these different contexts. So there are a number of issues and challenges. Sometimes it does feel like we're pushing the rocks up the hill, only for them to fall back again. You know, it's Sisyphus, isn't it? Rock up a hill. Constant changes, always, in education and health services. We work at the interface of these two services, don't we? We've got the educational demands upon us from universities and external demands, but also we're preparing our students and our learners for working in a changing health service. And for us in the UK, we are working very much under an austerity model, which causes huge challenges in itself. Challenges in recruitment, challenges in retention, challenges in morale, stress, burnout, all these sort of things. We also have an increasing number of accreditation standards, quality, clinical governance. We've got a lot of metrics to meet and to look at. And I think when we're talking about curriculum innovation, we often see that the system structures and the funding are misaligned. So we might want to do something, but actually it doesn't quite work in the way that we want to because we can't get the funding or the structures and systems mitigate against it. So what we have to be able to do ourselves and equip our learners is to be comfortable with managing and leading change. We need to be very expert in the health systems and the education systems that we work with, so that we've got that knowledge, that credibility and expertise there. And in terms of curriculum, which is one of my favourite things, we need to think about these flexible, agile curricula, not weighed down by huge structures, because we're training for the future, and the future is uncertain. What we also see then is a lot of siloed working. I was talking to Gary just before, and he said, you very, very rarely get doctors at the NET conference. So I've just come from the AMI conference, which is a European Association for the Study of Medical Education in Europe conference in Helsinki. Nearly 4,000 people at that conference, predominantly doctors, but other health professions as well. So really, we do work in silos, and in medical education, I don't know if anybody else works in medical education, do they? No, you see, you're sensible, but it's very idiosyncratic, really idiosyncratic. Do things that we wouldn't do in any other form of education. So we need to think about how that works. We're working with people with different needs and demands. Often I see top-level leaders are often out of touch with what we're trying to do in education. So we've got these ideas and we've seen it somewhere, we've been to a conference, and it's like, sorry, I don't actually know what you're talking about. And that's really difficult, I think. And so we've got to build up leadership and management capacity to actually challenge issues and make things happen. So we need good communication and networking. I didn't think about it when I wrote that, but what do we do as leaders? We're translating often. We're translating policy into practice. We're translating curriculum outcomes and aims into the reality in the classroom or on the ward or in the clinic. And so sense-making is a really key quality, I think, of leadership. How do we compress things into a compact form? We've got to work with different stakeholders as well, haven't we, and be comfortable with that, managing expectations and their needs. And I think all of us who work in universities have seen how students are so much more like consumers, especially international students. They're paying big fees and they expect a lot from us. And so we need to keep up to date with things so that we can keep it at the forefront of innovation and think about change. So this is my little orange model, leadership in threes. I'm going to go through, I've structured the presentation around this model. And if anybody wants the slides afterwards, by the way, just let one of Sarah's got the slides. And if you want them, just email and you can have them. If you use anything, please attribute it, and don't change it. I'll be after you with the water pistol. But I'm happy to share things, okay? So that's part of being a leader, isn't it? Sharing your stuff. So what we're going to look at are these different threes, the three skill sets, and I've put management, leadership and followership in there because they're really important, they're integrated. We do all of those all the time. And then we're going to follow the levels, the qualities, the expertise sets and the ways of learning. So, skill sets. This is what I've called the leadership triad. Three things. Management. We manage all the time, don't we? Planning, stability, providing order, doing things right, making sure that we meet these quality metrics, that we know what we're doing, that our students turn up in the right place at the right time, with the right handbooks, with the right learning experience, and somebody welcomes them. Leadership, then, is about change, direction, and adaptability. We call this perhaps doing the right thing. Perhaps the leadership has more a moral compass about it and a direction setting, whereas management is making sure that that ship is full of the provisions. Okay. So we need leadership and management, and depending on the situation and context, we step in and out of a leadership and management role, but we don't lead all the time. We don't. And I think being able to be a good follower, who's an active follower, supportive, questioning, a little bit challenging, helpful, is really important. And that helps that smooth running, that people know when they're in a leadership and management or a followership role or situation. Denhart and Denhart call it the dance of leadership, that we sort of dance about the place. So I think that's true. And I think certainly working with my students, I run a leadership master's program at Swansea. Our students, you know, they do more management than anything else, really. And so we talk about followership a lot. So the followership is quite helpful for students to think about. I think this is useful to think about how they work in teams, how teams function and are dysfunctional. So I think the followership is quite interesting. So we'll talk about leadership for a minute. I just did a Google search last week. 832 million hits for the word leadership, which is quite a lot. So what I've tried to do is distill it down slightly. We'll see how that works. Yeah, I think distilling is a useful thing. So what's a leader from the literature? Someone with followers. It's a bit hard to lead if you're just wandering around alone. Someone who connects with people and connects people up, knowing, oh, if you talk to so-and-so, yeah, they can help you with that. Ah, yeah, I've met somebody, I think you'd be interested with that person. Yeah, okay, connecting. Somebody with vision, drive and energy. Somebody who guides and motivates groups, teams, organisations towards common goals. So it's keeping that direction of travel. Good communicator is inspirational. When you're tired, it's a bit hard to be inspirational. But also these things I'll come on to again later. Perseverance, determination, has integrity and can be trusted. So if you look at, I'm not going to mention any names, but if you look at political leaders around the world, you can see they might not be leaders if we look at this sort of, rest my case. When I've made everything orange, pre-Trump, I have to change it to blue or something. Right, leadership theories. I'm not going to go through all these because there are a lot. This is a little selection of leadership theories and approaches. Does anybody teach leadership here? Few dares to put their hands up. Okay, so you'll have heard of most of these if you teach leadership, but most of us haven't. And I started, as Gary said, in education. In education, when I came into education a long time ago, we didn't really talk about educational theories very much either. Now, of course we do, and everybody, does their PG certs, and lots of people do masters and whatever. We're like that in leadership at the moment, I think, in healthcare and in healthcare education, that we're not using a theoretical base and we're not necessarily using a conceptual base. We just think we can do it. But it's changing. Okay, so that's just a list. So I've tried to distill it. We've got the orange slide. 3 levels. Okay, this is the top left of the slide. 3 levels. Intrapersonal. This is about you and your learners, getting to know yourself, developing self-insight, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, and how you respond under pressure. Okay, so that is a distillation of what we would do in the intrapersonal level. In the interpersonal, which probably from the theoretical sense is most of the leadership theory really, working with other people, patients, colleagues, working in teams, how do other people see you? How do you relate? So concepts such as relational leadership or dialogic leadership would come in here. Then the more recent set of theories, I suppose, the organisational and the system, thinking about the wider systems and organisations, the politics, the processes, how do you manage change and improvement at system or organisation or at that higher level? Okay, so they're the three levels that we would teach leadership around these three levels, but when we learn leadership, I think the three levels are helpful as well, to think about what do I need to know, where do I need to know more about or experience more. So I'm not going to read all these out. As I said, you can have the slides after. But the personal qualities or the personalities traits have been very, very prominent. We call them the great man theories because in the olden days, it was mainly men who were the leaders, okay? Obviously, it's changed now. But, you know. So position, heredity, religion, this idea of the heroic leader, you know, I put Ronald Reagan on a white horse there, you know, charges in, da, da, da. So it came from the military, a lot of this came from the military, but it did also come from religion and from position as well. So here we look at things like the trait theories, the qualities of a leader, things like the servant leadership. Why do we go into leadership? Do we want to serve people? Do we want to make a difference? Most of us have probably come into what we're doing because we wanted to make some sort of difference to people's lives. And often then we find ourselves pushed, moving upwards, and we're making a different difference. And I sometimes think I feel really away from healthcare, from the bedside or the clinic side or whatever. But I just have to think, well, I'm training the doctors of the future to be good health practitioners. So we see also, because we're working with people, the idea of emotional labour, these sort of things, the authentic leader, values are important, the idea of being a leader, we call that ontological leadership, and then this concept of wise leadership. Most of you probably have heard of this. It's the ocean model, the sort of five personality factors. So Judge and team, they actually looked at how this worked in terms of leadership, and they looked at they worked with managers and subordinates, they called them, but they worked with these people to do their personality traits, and then have a look to see, well, what would be the best leaders. So we can see that openness to experience is really important. Being curious about the world, being creative, being original. It's quite hard to be original, isn't it? But, you know, you can be creative and you can be curious. Okay? High in conscientiousness. Okay? You don't want a leader who is lazy or disorganized or whatever. High in extroversion. This isn't the Myers-Briggs type of extroversion. This is what we might call the normal sense of extroversion. So outgoing, a talker. Yeah? Agreeableness varies, because sometimes you've got to do the hard yards. And then neuroticism, low on neuroticism. So this is quite interesting. And if you do one of the five factors tests, what it helps you with is to learn where you might default to if you're stressed. So I'm really high on conscientiousness, yay, but I'm really high on neuroticism. Ooh. So, so when I'm stressed, I am awful, really. I'm like, oh, we have to get it done, and whoa, we've only got 10 minutes, and whoa. Yeah, so my team know that, and they calm me down, and I take more time about things. If I've got a high pressure something, I'll do it well before, because I know that I get anxious, okay, and I don't want that to go out into my team. So knowing a bit about yourself, doing this with your learners or with your team or yourselves is quite helpful. So charismatic leadership is one of these. Transformational leadership with personality traits. Self-confident, good communicator. So we've got Nelson Mandela there. However, the flip side of charismatic leadership is toxic or destructive leadership or narcissistic leadership, where somebody believes that they're so, now we could back to the orange again, right? Where somebody believes that they're so important and powerful and that they, that's a technical term, that. Dominant, overconfident, bullying, passive aggression, sabotage, not sensitive, not empathic. I read a really good article about Trump the other day, actually, which was talking about his lack of empathy. And I thought, actually, yeah, you can see, he really struggled, didn't he, with the Hurricane Harvey people. You know, it's like, oh, I'll hug you, but, you know, it's not easy. Who would want to hug him anyway? And that's another issue. Right, micromanaging, doesn't trust, get out of their depth. Sometimes leaders who are out of their depth can be quite toxic because they're struggling. And then what happens is you get this toxic culture. People are unhappy, they're stressed, and they leave. So that's the dark, what we call the darker side of the positive aspects of the charismatic leader. Second set of theories then were interaction of leaders with others. So we'll just list them there. I'm not going to read them all out. When we were in New Zealand, actually, at the bottom one, the power relations, we did some quite nice studies looking at newly qualified doctors and nurses and where they saw the power, authority and control in interprofessional teams. So that was with Mark Barrow and myself and Sue Gascoigne from the University of Auckland and Unitec. And there's a couple of articles that we published on that, if you're interested. Just search Barrow, McKimm and Gascoigne and you'll find it. It's 2 articles, but it was really interesting to see where the power was vested and who thought they'd got the power. So I'll just leave that dangling. So most of you, I think, will have heard of transformational leadership. Very, very common in the public sector. But the transactional side is the management, the exchange of reward for effort. Okay, you come and work for me and I'll give you some money, and if you work a bit harder, you might get a bit more or promoted or a holiday or whatever. So that's a transactional type of leadership. We do need that. But the transformational leadership has been very, as I say, very sort of endemic almost in education around the world. And this is about the inspiration motivating people towards what we might call the higher order goals or values. Now, as I've put here, it's appealing. Transformational leadership has an appeal to it. But actually, if you're working in managed systems, targets, performance measures, it can really, lead to cynicism. Am I being manipulated? Do they really value my work, or do they just actually want me to, write more articles or whatever? So alongside these comes a little bit of cynicism. So Bass talked about transformational leadership, and he talked about the 4 I's. The idealized influence, that's the role modeling. Inspirational motivation, come on with me, let's go. Intellectual stimulation, there's a challenge here, how are we going to do it? Let's get around the table, let's have a conversation. And individualized consideration, paying attention to individuals. That can be really hard if you've got a big team. When I first went to Swansea, my team was about 31, and it was really hard to pay attention to all those people. I nearly had to put them in the diary. Pay attention to X, Monday, 9 o'clock, because it was really hard. And what happens if you're not careful is you get an in-group and an out-group. So the people that you work more closely with, or you get on better, or whatever, turns into your in-group, and then that group outside can get marginalised. So I think it's good, the idea of individualised consideration, but it can be hard. The GMC, General Medical Council, UK, brackets, United Kingdom, I've got it now, I think I've got it properly. Look, a really interesting document. The GMC is actually great at producing guidance, if any of you, really loads of good guidance. But this one is about leadership and management for all doctors, and they talk about shared leadership, which is interesting in a way. But why I like this is the difference between accountability and responsibility. Now, it's more than just semantics, isn't it? Accountability, it means the buck stops with you, okay? But the responsibility in this idea of the teams is a shared responsibility. Now, I think that's a really useful thing to think about in your own practice. Am I accountable? Maybe. Who's responsible? Well, we all are as a team, okay? So I think that can be quite useful working in teams. I mentioned a couple of probably newer concepts, really. The concept of person-centered leadership. is really interesting. It's about really focusing on the people that you work with. Know and share why you do what you do. Talk it out. Why am I thinking this decision is the right decision? What is going on in my mind? Build a culture around a shared vision. Get people on side about, you know, when we've done this, I can just see our students doing whatever, la la la. You know, really get that vision going. I like this too. Encourage others regularly and intentionally. So keep encouraging people. Keep motivating. Operate from your strengths. So you're going to know what they are. Allow others to compensate for your weaknesses. Build a team. Have people around you that can do the things that you're not good at. Okay? Some things you'll have to do because you might be accountable. But I think that's a useful set of principles. And the other one that I like and is I think in business is now shown that inclusive leadership really taps into diversity and it can have a business strength as well. But it's good in itself, isn't it? Building relationships, thinking about mutual benefit, doing things with people, not to them. So we mean real inclusion here. The relationship with followers is essential. It's not leader-centric. I'll come on to that in a minute. And what it does is actively addresses unconscious and implicit biases that we all have. I was just saying to Gary, before we teach unconscious and implicit bias in our leadership program with our students. And the more I've read about it over the last year or so, I was reading a book yesterday, a novel, and it said something about, what was it? I can't remember. Something about, anyway, it was a man, something about a man, and it's something about his boss. And my very first unconscious poof was that the boss was a man. Okay, so, and then I had to go, stop that. It could be a woman. Because he'd run off with his boss, and I was thinking, oh, is he gay then? He was married to a woman, and now it's... But I didn't think that his boss could be a woman. So, we all have them, right? We all have them. But what I've taught myself, what I'm teaching myself to do is actually recognise the voice that's going on in my head, label it, and go, stop it, because they're cultural. They're almost like, you know, from our limbic system almost. They're culturally impressed upon us, these biases. And so the more we surface them, the more that we can actually address them and then move to a better place, hopefully, more inclusion. Anyway, so we're always learning. So third set, systems and organisations. Really thinking about leaders as change agents, thinking about building what we call social capital. So that's building leadership as a process, as an entity, not top-level leaders trickle down. And the latest sort of ones, we did quite a lot about complexity and systems theories, but the idea of sustainability, of eco-leadership, of connectivity, is that global leadership thing, about how do we do that? Are we going to give our planet back better? Unlikely at the moment, but, you know, how are we going to do our part from things like climate change or poverty or whatever? So that's eco-leadership. So we need to be adaptive then. We need to be able to work in complex and certain systems and times. We need to adapt our ways of working so that we can actually meet the challenges of new or what we call wicked problems. Wicked problems are those that don't have a clear answer. They're in complexity. The answer, there isn't always a right answer to a wicked problem. Okay? There might be a better way of answering it, but there's not a right answer. And then we call this cognitive complexity, thinking in a system way. So you might think of this conference as a networking system, or we might think of it as a set of individuals coming. Okay, so use cognitive complexity. Think, actually, it is complex. Think of all those conversations that go on, you know, over coffee or breakfast or whatever. That's complexity, isn't it? So this conference is a complex system. You can look at it as a complex system. And what we have then in these systems are individual agents. That's all you, delegates, and us, and whatever. You can act in ways that are not predictable. You might be bored by now and actually all start walking out, which would be a bit sad for me. But, you know, I don't know how somebody might start vomiting. Who knows what's going to happen? We're nurses, we'll clear it up. The actions are interconnected. If one person starts leaving, then another, then another, then another, everybody will be looking around and thinking. And one agent's actions changes the context for other agents. Okay, so what you do or don't do changes the context. That blue thing at the bottom is a bait ball. And a bait ball is some fish go into shoals and they move really fast. Oh, sorry, that meant to happen. They move really fast, and so the predators, which are at the bottom, can't get the individual fish very easily because they're moving, swirling in and out. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. That's a complex system. Interested. So what we also are doing is developing our learners as change agents, aren't we? We do it in classroom teaching, ward-based teaching, clinics. We get them going off overseas and doing stuff, and we're growing them like little acorns. So I'm not going to go into change models, but I think what's useful for you to think about, but also for your students, I think, getting them to use what we might call linear models of change, project management tools, because they're really helpful. A project management approach can be really helpful for you're doing lots and lots of things. We have other change models like Cotter's model. He's got an old model of 1996, but his Accelerate is the more modern one. They're change models which are a bit more iterative. And then when we're thinking about complex change, we can use the range of models, but Stacey's certainty agreement matrix is one I use quite a bit, I find quite helpful. So depending on the change you're trying to achieve, you need to pick your change model to fit that. And there's loads of models out there. And I could mention JISC, because they have fantastic resources on project management. Joint Information Systems Committee, is it? JISC? Okay, so that's really good. Just Google them and you'll find loads of models in there. Helpful. So we talked then, didn't we, about moving into these models. So we talk about distributed models now, shared leadership, collective leadership, collaborative leadership. Leadership as a process. It's co-creation, it's working in teams. Leadership at all levels. So this is something we can encourage our learners to do. We can offer to do ourselves. Workplace-based, making improvements by working together. And the expertise is dispersed throughout the team or the organisation. So in healthcare now, these are the models, particularly collective and collaborative leadership and shared leadership are the models that are sort of being talked about in terms of leadership. When you see it on the ground, I'm not sure that it always is like this, but that's the ethos. And then I mentioned the sort of eco-leadership, the servant leadership, all about making a difference, engaging with the moral purpose and values of organisations, looking to sustainability. And I think this is the hardest sort of leadership, especially if you're working with people who are above you, who perhaps you differ in your values or your morals, or you don't see the world in the same way, or you're making a difference is different from their making a difference. So these are the harder sorts of leadership, when your values are challenged. And we often assume people have the same values and morals as us, and they often don't. So it's about surfacing those, isn't it, and finding those. So, a bit about management. Bowman and Deal talk about academic leadership. If you're interested in leadership in academic settings, their new book, and one by Bowman and Gallos, are really good, actually. Reframing leadership, academic artistry. They talk about leadership and management as different, distinct, but they're both important. What we need is that objective perspective of the manager or management. No, we haven't got enough money for that. Well, if I move some money from there to there, yep, we might be able to do it. Yep, okay. But the brilliant flashes of what they call vision and commitment that wise leadership provides. So that's, oh, well, let's do things completely differently. I've seen something done somewhere else. What about this? So the two go together. So I would say, here's my little ship, my island, management without leadership is the wrong journey, okay? Because the leadership is about vision and direction, okay? So ship is sailing away and we actually don't really know where we're going. Leadership without management then would be a short journey. You might not have enough people, sailors or whatever they do on ships. Provisions, fuel, yeah? So your ship isn't safe or you run out of fuel or whatever. So that would be the short journey. So you need the both, yeah? And when we think about leadership theories, most of them are what we call leader-centric. They put the leader at the centre with a lot of power over the organisation or the group. But then the leader has then the responsibilities vested in them. They use that power to influence outcomes. Now, what happens then from the leader-centric theories is that we end up with stereotypes of leaders, charismatic, inspiring, la la la, you know, they're a natural leader. They're tall and white, male, old. Yeah, okay. That's not far from the truth, is it, when we think about... So, unconscious biases, that's what happens, we surface them out. Personality traits, behaviours, styles, contexts are what we focus on. Oh, look how they behave. Oh, my goodness me. Oh, not a true leader. So Trump is quite good to look at, actually, from this perspective. But what happens in terms of our dynamic of leaders and followers is the followers and the managers are then seen as secondary and less important. Oh, leaders, managers. Leaders, followers, no. Leaders, managers, followers. So let's look at followership. My little elephants there, all tagged on. Marinol Ben said that we can't understand leadership if we don't understand followership, okay, because it's a dynamic and it's relational. So the hierarchy isn't essential to leadership because most leaders are also followers, yeah? I've got a boss. Have you all got a boss? Yeah, so we do some following. We follow in our teams as well. Somebody has a really good idea. You're not going to say, oh, sorry, I'm the leader and I didn't have that idea, so pff. Yeah, so we follow. Interdependent roles can be very influential. We can actually influence through our followership quite heavily. But we do need to be dependable, we need to be trustworthy, and we need to have good communication skills if we're going to be good followers. We need to be responsive, and we also need to step up and back when we need to. So nobody leads all the time. Followers are rarely passive. Professionals are definitely not passive, are they? Are they? Kelly looked at these 4 roles. He talked about the passive followers. In his later work, he called them the sheep. The little L leadership, active followership, and big L leadership. And I think for students or for more, if you're a new in role or taking a new job, the little L leadership concept is really helpful. It's about taking small steps, managing a project, leading an initiative, taking on a new role. And it can help you see where you fit, where you can develop your expertise. So followership, I think, is really useful. What do? They exert upward influence through support, through ideas, or through resistance. No, I'm not doing that. But they also do things. They judge leaders, and leaders have to pass a test, okay? And then the leaders will have impact. The followers also need to be conversed with to find their needs, okay? And then Will's also said that a lot of leadership is the projection of an image that will appeal to followers. And so we can see this in politics. We can see this with Theresa May. We can see how her image with that election didn't appeal to a lot of people. People were like, switched off. So, and she got her image wrong, I think. The dissonance between the rhetoric and the action and the woodenness, if that's a word. So the image didn't work. So we have to think if we're in a leadership role, partly what do our followers expect from us? Talk to them. What do you want from me? Hey, how can I help you? Yep, all that stuff. But actually then it's your image too. So Barbara Kellerman talked about the relationships between leaders and followers, and she said wherever or whenever the relationships are more similar than they're different, and they involve some dominance and some deference. Okay, so we have a dominance and deference. Culturally, this is very different in certain cultures as what we call a faraway leaderships, quite a different distance. But the most important thing is what she calls the level of engagement. How passionate, committed and involved your leaders, your followers are with you and what you're trying to do. That would be the activists and the diehards. At the other end of the continuum, are the isolates or the bystanders, where they don't really feel much about it or care much, actually, and they don't do much. Okay, so in terms of followership, we need to work out sort of where people lie on that. So I talked about my orange model. One of the other things is about gaining credibility. How do we do this? So I suggest, from just thinking about it more than anything, but just reflecting, understand your industry, understand healthcare education, know how systems, funding, programs work, possess a theoretical educational knowledge, okay? So we need that because we can talk the talk then, we've got the jargon, we've got the understanding, but also know about the wider sociocultural, political and economic context so that you keep ahead of trends, policies, innovations, movements. Become an expert in your area, however tiny that expertise is. It might be expertise about your own module or some element of a program or some clinical thing. I think too, when people are, power's quite low, like the junior doctors doctors in training I work with a lot, their projects are really important because for a month or two, they've got an expertise in something that nobody else has because they've done that project. It's usually a quality improvement project. And then understand your strengths and weaknesses. Structure your leadership development. Think actively about, if I offer to be on that committee, it'll be a bit dull and boring, but I will learn some stuff. I'll learn more. I'll offer to chair it. Oh, scary, but have a go, okay? So learn things. The personal qualities then are really important, and we looked at all these personal qualities leaders should have, but what I've done is just distill down for this model 3 qualities that emerge from studies of people who are successful. The first one is resilience, bounce back ability, adversity or challenge, emotional intelligence, okay, self-awareness, empathy, etc., and grit. Who's heard of grit in this theoretical? Yeah, okay. Right, so really interesting, the grit. And I'll talk about it in a minute, but it's this combination of resilience, passion, hard work, perseverance, determination, and direction. It's a long game, is grit. So resilience has 4 components, mental resilience, physical, spiritual, and emotional. Your values, your beliefs, and sense of purpose. Okay, that doesn't have to be religious, but it's about what's in here. What drives you. How do you feel and control your emotions? So that's important, so that we can not get too stressed about things. Fitness, stamina, and nutrition really important to have that physical resilience as well, that you can cope with things. And also your psychological approach, your self-belief, your outlook, your perspective. So these 4 components are part of what we call resilience. And we can help develop our own, and we can talk with our learners and help them to be more resilient. The resilient leader then, operating on the 3 levels, the intrapersonal, interpersonal, and organisational system, has to then project this clear vision and direction, have an awareness of themselves and others, emotional intelligence, have some presence. A leader has to have a presence and some grit that keep going when things are tough and make confident and considered decisions. So listen to people. And then if as a leader you're resilient and you can help your team be more resilient as well. So most of you, all of you probably will know about emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman, biggest proponent, I suppose. But thinking about your self-awareness, understanding yourself, your self-regulation, controlling yourself, your motivation, empathy, and social skills, really important. And I don't know about you, but certainly in medical education, we're working with our students and doctors in training to really sort of develop this emotional intelligence now, proactively doing it. So Higgs and Dulovich talked about it in a slightly different way, which I think is helpful as well. The drivers, what motivates you, what energizes you, what curbs the drivers, what holds you back, the constrainers, and the enablers, actually helping people to succeed. And I think, we can actually help people develop a better sense of emotional intelligence by doing some targeted work. So grit, Angela Duckworth did a nice piece of research on grit. It's a stable personality trait, she suggests. It needs effort. It's not about ability, but it's accomplishment of work and achievement. And what you've got is this perseverance and passion for your long-term goals, and that gives you the motivation and the stamina to get through challenges and adversity. Okay. And she suggests that you're either gritty or you're not gritty. They're pointing at me. I'm looking at that clock. They're telling me something if it's right. So I'll talk faster. So what does being gritty mean? I have nearly finished, actually, I think. What you've got to be gritty, deep interest in what you're doing. If you're doing work that you don't like, you're not going to be very motivated. Okay, so a lot of us are really lucky. We do work that we love, and it doesn't feel like work. But when we do work that we don't, it's really hard to be gritty. Practice your skills, show yourself discipline, a conviction and purpose about your work. It has to matter. You have to feel that what you're doing is making some difference to somebody or something. You can do the leadership and be a leader. And as I said before, the long game. Okay, I often talk with my team about the long game. Okay, let's get it. We won't get it right next year, or it might not be the year, but for the long game, we'll get it right. So, 3 ways of learning. Formal opportunities to learn leadership. So if you want to develop yourself as leaders, courses, workshops, degrees, whatever, lots of opportunities there. Practicing it, though, because it's a skill, isn't it? Obtaining constructive feedback and having purposeful reflection. Have a really good buddy by you who will tell you when you do something really well and tell you when you didn't do it really well. So I think that's really important. And that learning leadership, it's lifelong, isn't it? So it's experience, gain of practical wisdom, we call it phronesis, practical wisdom, how to behave and function in different situations. You can't, young leaders, new leaders, younger people will lead, but the more experience you get, if you reflect, you will hopefully lead better. Hopefully. So Petrie talks about 3 ways of learning. The horizontal leadership, that's your evidence base. That's your theories, your concepts, your models, your tools. But the vertical leadership is what Petrie suggests what we need to put those theories into practice. We need challenges. He calls them heat experiences. Oh, that was a really tricky meeting. That was not good. Heat experience. Sense making. What was going on in that meeting? 2 colleagues. Well, so reflection and conversation. And then being open to colliding perspectives about what's going on. Well, actually, I thought you were really colleague to me, I thought you were really out of order when you said that. I could see they all looked really disappointed. Oh, no, I never even thought of that. I thought it was straightforward. Okay, so being open to things that challenge your sense of the world. So the horizontal leadership is a bit like the knowledge, pouring it into the jug, which can grow. And then the vertical leadership is where you apply that. So you have the 3 elements, and Petrie calls it the vertical sweet spot, which is a bit bizarre, but it's the bit in the middle where everything comes together, where you're getting the colliding perspectives, you're getting the sense-making, and you're getting the heat experiences. So reflection is important. So what do we need to do then? I think, my personal opinion, I suppose, I think we need to develop leadership, management, and followership with our learners and with ourselves. I think we need understanding, we need some knowledge and concepts, we need those skills. Management skills are very learnable, actually. They're very learnable because there's loads of models, and you can learn how to read a balance sheet or put a critical path analysis together or whatever. We can learn management skills. Leadership qualities will come from you, so partly innate, partly from you, but you can modify yourself, your behaviours, if you've got emotional intelligence and good friends. Following and managing well is as important as leading well. I think it's a triad that we do all of those, that dance of leadership again. And I think when we're developing leadership with ourselves or with our learners, it has to be evidence-based, it has to be informed by theory, but it has to be really practice-driven. So those concepts and tools have to apply to practice, not just blue sky stuff. And then, as I said just a little while ago, then let's look at that combination of horizontal and vertical leadership development. So we would, with our medical students, when they've been out on their first placement, the foundation doctors, new interns, just qualified, come and talk with. They meet, we don't meet with them, but they facilitate sessions where they can actually talk about the challenges that they've had and different issues, working in teams and with other colleagues. So that's an example of horizontal and vertical leadership put into play. And we do that all the time, I think, in our curricula. So hopefully I've given you a bit of a model, a bit of a framework to think about leadership. Hopefully some ideas that you might take back to the ranch, wherever the ranch might be. And I think that's me. Thank you.